What's great about this plugin is if, like me, you love saturation, you can go from like this pretty bland drum sound to this really quickly. It just sounds so much better. Thanks for joining me today. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you what I believe to be one of the most underrated and overlooked plugins available in Logic Pro. This is a stock plugin that comes bundled with Logic and it sounds incredible. It has loads of amazing sounding saturation modules, compression, bass enhancement. It does all kinds of stuff. And in my experience, I'm not seeing a lot of people talking about it, particularly using it in the way that I'm using it, which is to help enhance sounds, add some saturation, some excitement, some energy to a mix. So without further ado, let me share with you what I believe to be one of the best kept secrets available in Logic Pro. So the plugin in question today is Phat FX, which is a Logic stock plugin, and this is available under Logic Multi-Effects, Phat FX here, and this is going to bring this up, and it looks like this. When you look at it, I think a lot of people think there's this bandpass section, this filter matrix, this other filter over here, these LFO modules, modulation effects. I think people look at it and go, this is for synths, this is for like electronic dance music, whatever, something where you're going to be doing a lot of modulation, a lot of kind of automated effects, and you can do that with this plugin. But actually, what's also in this plugin is this incredible distortion section, which has loads of different saturation modules, which all sound really good. And then also this bass enhancement, which is very similar to Waves R-Bass, if you've ever used that. And then this compressor section over here, which has the Logic compressor modules, which also sound really good. And this is what we're going to be focusing on today, to add some distortion, some saturation, some grit, and some character to the drums and the lead vocal in this track. The track that we're going to be working on today is a song called Poison Center by Freakers. Freakers is actually my own band, and this is a track that I produced and mixed, and I really love what we did with this song. It's very sort of angular, punchy indie rock, quite straightforward, with a lot of kind of pop sensibility to it as well. So we'll take a listen to what it sounds like, and then I'll show you how I'm using these plugins to enhance the sound that's already there and add some energy and add some grit, like I say. Before we begin, I just want to let you know that if you are interested in learning more about mixing in Logic Pro, then you can get my Mixing Mastery course, in which I mix an entire track from start to finish in Logic using nothing but stock plugins, teaching what I believe to be the fundamentals of building a great sounding mix every time that you mix. It's a full video course that breaks down my entire process. It comes with stems for you to practice mixing, as well as some bonus presets that I've included from packs of mine. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, you can check that out in the link in the description below. So let's take a listen, and then we'll jump in and see what's going on.
Daylight become a view at conversation points. Never mute. Oh, and I for virtues elsewhere. Outside a digital mind, and I'm the outdoor type. So you shun me, you gun me down, and down I go.
As I say, pretty punchy, straightforward indie rock kind of thing. And we're going to be looking at how we can use the Phat FX to enhance this drum sound. So what we have here is all of these different drum tracks, pretty standard: kick, snare, hi-hat, toms, overheads, room mics, etc., all being fed to this one drum bus down here. And this is where we're going to start with the Phat FX. So without any of the stuff that we have going on, which at the minute is just a simple bit of compression and then some gain just to level it up a little bit, and then the Phat FX plugin on there. What I should say at the moment is we're working with this plugin in an indie rock sort of context with live drums, but you don't have to just use this on live drums for rock music. You know, this can be used with electronic drums, with sampled drums, in hip hop, pop. It doesn't even have to be used on drums. I'm going to show you as well how we use it on vocals. It can be used on all kinds of stuff. The point is, it's got some great sounding saturation, some bass enhancement, compression, all kinds of stuff that you can use. So, you know, don't think that just because we're using this on live drums in an indie rock tune that that's the only use for it. It can be used on anything within the mix. And in my experience, it always sounds good. So yeah, let's check it out. Dry, these drums sound like this. So a pretty good drum sound, punchy, direct, but not a lot of character to it, and that's what we want to start adding to this. You'll hear as well there is like a little bit of spill going on from the lead vocal in the room mics, which is just where the scratch vocal was recorded in the same room as the drums, and that's just something that's happened. It's not a big deal. You don't hear it in the final mix. It's not something we tried to correct. So yeah, you know, you will hear a bit of vocal when I play back the drums. That's just because there's a bit of spill from the recording, like I say. So first up, we just have a bit of compression. This is the Logic stock Studio VCA compressor. This is doing this. Helping that snare pop out a little bit more, adds a little bit of grit and distortion from this soft saturation already, but the real kind of main saturation is going to come from Phat FX. So after this we have the gain plugin, which is just to bring it up in the mix a bit more so that it sits like the level that we want it. It's kind of running out of headroom here, so if I play that back, you'll see without this the drums just drop in level, so this is really just leveling up the drums. It's not really doing anything else.
It's like it's become a view.
So yeah, bit of compression, then the gain just to bring the drums up to the right level so that they are where we want them in the mix. So if I just bring up the Phat FX plugin on the drum bus for now, I'm going to set this back to my user default setting, just so I can show you sort of how we build this in. So we're going to start over here at this saturation module. Like I say, I've turned off the band pass, the filters, all of this other stuff, because we're not going to need any of this. We're just going to be focusing on this distortion module, the bass enhancer and the compressor, and then the master section over here. But for now, let's start with the distortion section. So we have all these different types of saturation. If we click on here, we've got 3 different types of saturation that can be blended together at any one time. So we've got dirt, by default, this soft saturation, and then this tube drive as well. I like this dirt section. It's kind of almost a bit tapey. It's like, it sounds more like a kind of tape saturation. So if I crank this up, you'll hear what this is doing. Straight away, it's adding some character. You do have to watch, because as we bring it up, you know, the level comes up, so we're just trying to level match it so that in and out it's kind of the same level when we bypass it. Let's hear what it sounds like if we blend in some of this soft saturation. So the soft saturation is a bit more subtle. It's not really kind of doing too much until we get to here, like audible saturation. It's adding something which is quite nice, sort of a bit of coloration, but like audible distortion kind of kicks in as we push that a little bit more. So that might be a nice thing to have. I'm just going to blend the dirt back a little bit, but let's just turn that off a second and let's hear what the grit sounds like. So that's not subtle at all. That's like pretty heavy. Also quite like this diode one too. Again, not subtle at all. And this is what I love about this particular distortion section, is that it has all these different modules and they're so different in terms of their character and their coloration and the kind of different things that you can do. You know, something like squared is going to give you a real like hard clipping sound. And then you have something like downsampler. It can be used for way more creative effects, but we're not going to go that far just right now. We're going to go back to the soft saturation one because I really like that. And I think let's blend a bit of that in. So that's nice. That's adding like a real sort of nice grain to that top end, just making it a bit more characterful. We'll blend some of this dirt back in as well. Let's hear what happens if we add in the tube saturation, which to my ears is a bit brighter, way more colourful. Typically what you would expect from kind of tube saturation is like warm, quite bright, crisp sort of distortion. Yeah, nice. That's adding so much energy, so much grit and character to these drums. And I feel like that's really kind of helping it sit in the mix. It's helping it almost lengthen that snare a bit. It almost changes the groove if we push it too far. We don't want to push it too much, but I really like what that's doing just to help fill the space and really grab that energy. Now, if we want to do a bit more tape style emulation and kind of create a bit more of what we'd expect tape to do to drums, we can use this band pass up here and switch this to something like smooth. Now, what this is just a filter, like low pass, high pass filter, and we can just roll some of this top end off, use the resonance and these different filters to create something that just smooths that top end a bit, where it's gotten a bit gritty now. I don't want to go crazy with that. Like if you wanted to do a super lo-fi thing, you could really bring that down. But I'm just going to keep it around about 14K, just because to my ears, what that's doing is removing some of that super bright sparkle, which is getting in the way a bit with the guitars. Like the guitars on this track are super bright, super kind of like edgy, and I don't want it to be fighting with that too much. So if I just roll this off with that smooth filter, it's doing a nice, just decaying that top end a little bit, getting rid of it, smoothing it off and helping the drums to sit in the mix a bit more. Okay, that sounds cool. What I want to do now is start to try and enhance that low end a bit. And I'm going to use this bass enhancer section, which if you've ever used R-Bass by Waves before, then you'll be familiar with this kind of process. It's super simple, and it's basically just adding some lower end harmonics. So if we turn this on, you'll see we've got an amount, and then we've got a frequency here. So let's take a listen to what this sounds like with just the standard 90 hertz, 50%. Cool, that's really like helping that feel much fatter, extending that low end, but not getting in the way of the bass guitar, which is nice. Got that set to around about 80 hertz, just 50% mixed in. There are a couple of different types here. So we have warm, classic, and clip. I'm just going to keep it on warm because that sounds good to me. And then finally, what we're going to do is add a bit of compression. Obviously, we've already got this Studio VCA compressor here, this Focusrite style. Super fast release, super slow attack, 4:1 ratio, just doing some general sort of drum bus compression. But what I want to do now is add a bit of this in as well, because I think this sounds really good. So we're going to use the vintage VCA, which is SSL style kind of thing. Going to set the release super fast. I'm going to bring this right back here. You'll notice immediately there's going to be a jump in volume because this compressor does sort of auto match the gain. So we just make sure you bring the level down a bit, and we bring it down here and blend that back in so we get like a good A-B with this. notice what that compressor is doing, because it's after the saturation. When we engage that compressor, it's really bringing that grit forward. It's making it sound way more distorted, and that's because the compression is happening after the saturation. So what's happening is it's being saturated, and then all of that sort of artifacts from the saturation are being squashed even more with the compressor. What we can do if we want to change that is just drag these around. So the compressor could come before the saturation, right down here, bring the compressor all the way to the beginning, and it's going to sound like this. So being able to drag these around here gives us a whole different layer of control, because it means that we can, maybe put the bass enhancement before the distortion, and then that bass enhancement is going to make the saturation act even more on the low end or on the compressor, whatever it may be. Just by moving these things around, it's going to change the tonal characteristics. And that's what I love about this plugin, is it gives you so much control in such a simple interface. So let's take a listen to what we've done to the drums, A, B with the Phat FX on and off, and see what a difference this has made. You can hear that's made an enormous difference. It's adding so much more characters to those drums now. It really feels like there's a lot of grit, a lot of color. The low end is extended in a nice way. The compression is adding some energy. And yeah, it's just really enhancing the sound of those drums. The real challenge with this plugin is just getting the balance right between the mix and the output and the input, just to make sure that we're not kind of tricking ourselves with jumping too much in volume and us thinking it sounds better. So yeah, just make sure that you get the mix, the output, and the input balance right. And then you can just do all sorts of incredible things with this plugin. Okay, so next up, we're going to look at the lead vocal and see how we can use Phat FX to add some grit and some saturation to that, give it a bit more character and help it cut through the mix a little bit more. You'll see that I've got this lead vocal, which is the main track being fed to this lead Vox bus, and then have some parallel compression. This bright Vox thing is turned off. We're not using that. And this sort of parallel setup is something that I use quite a lot. You'd have seen other videos. I've got a video called The Ultimate Vocal Chain, where I talk about doing this kind of thing, but you're just using stock plugins. You can check that out if you're interested after this one. In the meantime, I'll show you what's going on this bus. We have some other plugins that are not stock plugins in this case. I've just got a bit of RVox here, which is purely using the gate. I really like how the gate sounds, just to clean up a bit of spill and stuff going on in this lead vocal. And then we've got Phat FX. Then I've got this VEQ, which we'll enable afterwards, Pro Q and de-esser as well. We're going to put some sends on. But let's have a listen to what this vocal sounds like on its own, soloed, with just this gate on. And this is basically entirely dry.
Dislikes become the view. At conversation point, never mutual. You ache for virtue.
So the parallel compression and stuff that's going on is adding a bit of grit to it, and it has a bit of grit from where it was recorded through a tube mic into like a 1073 style preamp. And that's kind of naturally adding a bit of edge to it, but we want it to be even more edgy, have a bit more saturation and a bit more color. So let's see what we're doing with Phat FX. If I bring this up again, I've already got some stuff dialed in on this one. So the minute I'm using the dirt, the diode and the tube saturation, and that sounds like this.
Dislikes become the view. At conversation point, never mutual. You ache for virtue, and I for virtues elsewhere. Outside a digital mind, I'm the outdoor type.
Yeah, cool. That sounds nice. I think that sounds good. It's adding a nice edge, bit of grit to the vocal, helping it cut through the mix a little bit more, particularly with those guitars that, like I said earlier, they're super bright, super edgy. So the vocal sort of has to stand up to that. And I'm always conscious when it comes to vocals, if you push the distortion too much, then it does something to the low mids that just makes them way too thick and way too big and ends up swallowing the rest of the track. So having it dialed in about 43% is nice, because that's just adding enough edge that it cuts through without that distortion really enhancing the low mids to the point where it swallows the rest of the track up, like I say. Then we've got the VEQ just coming after this, and this is a classic Waves plugin, just adding a bit of top end, taking out about 2.2K, some of that sort of harshness, and then just filtering everything below 150 just to make that distortion a bit smoother. And then using a very sharp sort of band here, 2.4K. This is taking out some of that edge, that sort of like hard, ear-piercing, horrible shrill that frequency that comes through on that vocal. And then just a bit of de-esser at the end. Again, you'll see I use a lot of these old Waves plugins a lot because they just sound really good, and I've used them for years, so I know they work. So that combined with the Phat FX sounds like this. If we also enable these sends down here, we got a bit of reverb going on, very short kind of room reverb, then some Echo Boy just doing a vocal slap, and then lastly some widening, which again, something you may have seen me do in other videos. If you've seen my vocal processing videos before, you know I like this widening trick. Okay, so let's hear that now with all the plugins on except Phat FX. We'll turn that on and off. Also brought the vocal double back in down here, so it just kind of gives a bit of thickness. We'll see what that sounds like.
Dislikes become the view at conversation points, never mutual. You ache for virtue, and I for virtues elsewhere. Outside a digital mind, and I'm the outdoor type. So you shun me, you gun me down, and down I go.
So you can hear that's made a massive difference to the sound of the drums and to the lead vocal. And yeah, I love this plugin. I think there's so much power in it. It's really like super flexible, and if you look past what it looks like when you initially load it up and you turn off all the filters and all the other stuff, I mean, you might want to use it for the filters because the filters in this are really cool and you can do loads of great modulation stuff. But if you're looking for great sounding saturation and some sort of equivalent to Waves R bass but in Logic Pro stock format, then use this. This is such a great sounding plugin. I like it on drums, kick drum, snare drum, individual kind of drum samples or individual drum mics. The whole drum bus, like we've used it here. On bass, sounds great on bass guitar particularly, and on lead vocal, on backing vocals. I've even used this on the mix bus in the past as well. There's all sorts of stuff that you can do with this plugin. Sounds really good. You can do the kind of tape emulation style thing, like I said before. Endless possibilities with this plugin. And to me, a lot of the time, I end up using this over much more expensive, well-known plugin manufacturers because this just sounds good pretty much every time I use it. So if this has just opened your eyes to the power of Phat FX and the infinite number of possibilities within this plugin, and you like what you've seen in this video, then please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment below, and let me know how you're getting on with this plugin in your mixes. And if you want to know more about mixing in Logic Pro, you want to know more about my process, then you can get my Mixing Mastery course, in which I mix an entire track from start to finish, teaching what I believe to be the fundamentals of building a great sounding mix in Logic. So if that sounds like something that's of interest to you, then I've left a link in the description below. Click on that, head to my website, www.guybritton.com/store, and you can get that course right now. Thanks very much for watching. Hopefully see you soon.